sir.
Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like you to compare the conduct and the strategy of the American military during the war in Iraq, Desert Storm, with this military strategy in the war in Kosovo. How do you feel about the actions of our commanders, their decisions on the way they conducted the war?
Well, the questioner asked about the strategy of the war in the Balkans as compared to what we did in the Gulf War, and is one who's covered
From
both.
all that you know.
I'm sorry?
From all the facts that you're aware of, yes.
From all the facts that I'm aware, to make some comparison. I'm going to try to answer that question, but again, I want to remind you, you know, I was a private, a buck private in the Marine Corps for a very short time, and with a very undistinguished record. And so you will understand if I say to you as a preface that I'm always a little nervous about talking about military strategy. Yes, I have covered a few wars, you know, some of them date lines long since forgotten, in the Gulf War and this war. But the short answer to your question is, one difference was when we went into the Gulf War, there were so many U.S. military officers, particularly flag rank officers, who had gone through the Vietnam experience, and who, rightly or wrongly, had as an article of faith, no incrementalism. That is, the next time we go, got to be the whole thing. I mean, you know, all in, all at once. Now, it's true that everything from the terrain to the geopolitical situation around the Persian Gulf lent itself to, for example, the kind of aerial bombardment that we laid on Iraq. The aerial bombardment in Iraq was full out from word go, and do it every day, do it to the max or something near the max every day. Now, in the Balkans, whether one sees it as a good idea, a bad idea, or doesn't know, there was a different approach, and it was to go back to a form of incrementalism, to slowly increase the pressure, day by day, week by week. Please understand, I'm not here to argue that one is a better strategy than the other. For one thing, completely different situation. In the Balkans, not everything, again, from terrain to the geopolitical situation than it was in the Persian Gulf. I will say this, that on my second trip to Belgrade, I was there the night they turned off the lights. Remember, the first time we had a raid that shut down the power, turned off the lights for most of Yugoslavia, and that also meant turning off the water because the water needed the power to go. That there was, you could not only see it, hear it, but feel it, the change in mood between before they shut off the lights and the power and the next day after they'd shut off the lights and power. I said to myself at the time, and I wrote in my notebook, I think this may be the decisive moment of the war. And I stayed another, 3 days after that and became even more convinced that it was a decisive moment. The reason for raising this, I think there is a legitimate question to be asked. Well, if we had chosen to use this weaponry on the second, third, fourth day, or second or third week of the war, would it have made a difference? I don't know the answer to that question. I'm here to bear witness, eyewitness, that when we did do it, when we did turn off the lights for the first time, there was a distinct change in mood. The mood of the Serbian street and countryside ceased to be one of complete, total, and utter defiance and complete confidence that they would prevail to something considerably less than that. So make of that what you will. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I was struck by your comments just now when we took out the lights, and you seemed to be criticizing the U.S. government for waiting as long as it did to take out the lights in the water facilities. Isn't part of the reason, I hope part of the reason that they waited as long as they did is that that's a war crime? And it troubles me when you say we, when you talk about the U.S. government, when you're presumably a journalist, an independent journalist.
Well, I would hope not presumably, but I take your point.
And why do we seem to only recognize a war crime when it's done by another government and not our own?
Fair question. Again, can you hear the question in the back of the room, because we save time if you could? Well, as to the first, I tried to make the point that I was not being critical of the waiting. And if I left you with the impression you said I seem to be critical, I tried to underscore I'm not passing judgment on that strategy as opposed to the other strategy. I was simply trying to bear witness to say it's what I saw there. That's not to, I don't think that conveys criticism. It's to make a point. Now, to your larger point about we. I understand what you're saying, and I may be wrong about this. I've asked myself any number of times. But, you know, I like to think I didn't just tumble off the turnip truck. I've been around the world a few times, been in a few places, and had to think through this business of we. I think, if I may guess from the nature of the way you asked the question, you have a different view and I respect it. But I'm an American reporter. Yes, I'm a reporter and I want to be accurate, I want to be fair, but I'm an American. I consider the U.S. government my government. So yes, I do. When U.S. pilots in U.S. aircraft turn off the lights, for me, it's we. And about that, I have no apology. I think you and I may be on different sides of the street with that, but it doesn't do any good here for me to try to kid you. I'm an American reporter, and yes, when there's combat involving Americans, you know, criticize me if you must, damn me if you must, I'm always pulling for us to win.
Indulge me. Sorry. Indulge me if you will. My larger point was, since you are an American, and since I am an American, isn't it more noteworthy and more newsworthy and more important that we note if our government is engaged in a war crime?
About that, we agree. That if our government engages in war crimes, it's at least as important, and I would agree with you, more important that we report the war crime. But where we may differ, I'm not sure, let me say, I don't think the decision to turn off the lights would fall in the category of a war crime.
If I suggest a guest for your evening news, Walter Rockler, who was a prosecutor at Nuremberg,
right,
and who was the first Nazi hunter in the Justice Department, says that it is. And I would hope that a voice like his could get on the evening news occasionally.
I know to whom you refer, and wouldn't have any trouble getting on the evening news. I do have a different view, but I never rule out the possibility the other fellow is right, and you may be right about this. Thanks for the question.